You're no peril, you're good. And it comes as a surprise to no one, Sauron is. So to get us started, let's actually define at least one thing. Let's define what Sauron is. So this is a quote from the Tolkien Gateway. So, as one of the most powerful Maiar, Sauron was created by Iluvatar before the music of the Ainur. At the beginning of time, he was amongst the Ainur who entered into Ea. Here he became one of the Maiar of Aule, amongst whose people he was deemed mighty and surpassed only by the smith himself, and was known as Myron. So the synopsis is, we get full disclosure on what the stranger is and what the stranger is not. We introduce another part of Middle-earth, and we start talking a little bit about the Rune and the Easterlings. We also get to connect with really what is Sauron's motivation, who Sauron plays in terms of his motivation for the things that he does, and even potentially an attempt at redemption. We also get an opening into what is going on and what motivates the different characters that we're dealing with. This was my favorite episodes of all the episodes. I'm not going to front, I'm not going to come up with a reason to not like it. So, full disclosure, spoiler alert, bunch of spoilers, going to spoil the whole season right now. So, some great dialogue from Galadriel. I did not cross that bitter ocean only to drown now. So, some of the things that really worked for me. So, consistently, like the cinematography, I enjoyed the cinematography. I liked a lot of the different shots that they took. I liked the fact that the action was very, very consistent when I compare it to some other episodes which were on the slower side. And so, for example, they took one of the slower stories that included the dwarves and they kind of like disappeared that. You know, I guess they made the choice because they just wanted the action to move and move. So that really worked. The cinematography, shots they took, the way they handled the strangers' interaction with the Sinister Sisters, the battle between them, and even the fact that there was the loss of life of Sadok, who passed away. That kind of worked. Other things that worked that were very, very powerful were the clarity that Galadriel finally got about the darkness. And so now I'm going to go back that when they were riding together, and then there was a scene where they were with Adar, and she said that she felt something and he said that he felt it too. I would say it wasn't love she felt, she just felt the darkness of Sauron is actually what she was feeling. Of course, we must clarify that Sauron was not created to be evil. And in fact, originally Sauron's name was not Sauron, which means abhorred in one of the elven tongues. And the fact that Sauron had his hand in the creation of the rings, that part really worked, because that part is pretty authentic. And it's kind of reminiscent of my basic understanding of the Silmarillion, which I'm slowly going through now. So the whole sequence of Sauron / Halbrand entering into her head, I thought that was perfect, because that also crystallizes exactly the type of entity that Sauron is. So Sauron is not a man. So, of course, Sauron could be in her head, feeding her stuff and talking to her, while she really wouldn't be able to distinguish the real from the fake. That bit was excellent. And going from his pretending to be Finrod, then his pretending to be, of course, Halbrand, which is sort of like his alter ego for most of the season. The whole thing with most of the elves being really, really weak, it really doesn't work. These are the oldest race that Tolkien created, and that were created by the equivalent of God in the Tolkien universe. So while maybe there are some dudes that are quote unquote weak or a little bit more potentially effeminate, but all of them to be like that, it just doesn't work. And then the idea that Halloran went 6 days without dying, that should have been a red flag right there. Another issue that I have is when they're healing Halloran with the elven medicine, why is it that his body is a body of a human being? They wouldn't detect anything when he was unconscious? That, I don't know. I kind of, it's just a question. So I leapt from the ship because I believed that I was not worthy of it. That is a great quote. But once again, we're totally changing Galadriel's personality. So there's a great quote from Maya Angelou. When people tell you who they are, believe them. Pretty much from the second episode, my view on Halloran as a character was pretty much, I knew that Halloran was pretty much an evil character. And then he did say, I did evil things. And he did say, I served the Dark Lord. So he did intimate that, truthfully, a bunch of different times. So it's kind of interesting because in this part I'm going to talk about, I'm going to just get connected a little bit to an outside issue that I know, like Tolkien and his faith. And the reason why I'm going to do that is that the serpent in the garden really, at a certain moment, though his intentions were to deceive, he just asked a bunch of questions. And there were many times where the devil, and at least the Christian faith, is very fully transparent. Now, getting away from, I think that the best hint that we got as far as the story making or the creation on the part of the writers early on, when we look at some of the other episodes, that Halloran is not who he says he is his ability to dispatch with 4 or 5 guys with minimal effort in Numenor. And we must remember that Numenor, these are very powerful men in general who are able to fight. So the ability of him to dispatch with 4 or 5 guys without really breaking a sweat, really big red flag. Going back to actual story or the plot, this idea that, truthfully, Halloran, to his credit, said, you know, I did a lot of bad things. I don't really know that I can be redeemed. Is I get this feeling like they're retconning Galadriel. And the reason I say that they're retconning Galadriel is that I'm pretty much, and this is just my theory, is that they changed the last episode fully. That the last 2 episodes, to be quite honest, they had them one way, and they did a lot of editing and changed them completely. That's my theory on the last 2 episodes. Basically, the idea that they changed Galadriel within the first 10 minutes of the episode, and they continue on this trajectory of having Galadriel be more of an empathic person, more of a good person. So it's like they just changed her completely. And to me, they probably should have started this change earlier in the season. So another major problem that I have with this particular episode is the idea that the Sinister Sisters, who potentially, I'm assuming, are from Rhûn, who potentially are Easterlings, the fact that they don't really know who Sauron is, the fact that they assume that the stranger is Sauron, I have trouble with this, because I really get the impression that either they're playing games and that the stranger could be Morgoth, or they're playing games and the stranger could be a blue wizard. But the concept, even at the beginning of this episode, that the 3 sisters, basically they're saying that the 3 sisters are stupid because they're like, you're Lord Sauron, that I have trouble with that, because it presupposes that they're simple. They're going to say that a lot of her behavior that I complained about, or that many people complained about, that was negative. It was the influence of Sauron on her heart. And I think that's a good ploy, you know, I think that's a good idea. I just, to be quite honest, don't really think it's the truth. I think that's what they're going to do, and that seems like the angle, because when we look at, for example, the development of the rings, and that idea even coming to Celebrimbor, the idea comes from like a whispering serpent who is Halbrand, who is really Sauron. The only real clarity that we have on the stranger is that he is in Istari, and that he's a very powerful wizard, and he's able to kill 3 quote-unquote powerful spiritual beings. That's the only thing we know, is that he's one of the most powerful wizards there is, but we still have him walking around being called the stranger. And then I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into it. So the idea is they helped him remember. So they helped him remember how to speak. But they also helped him remember that he did a lot of bad things. So a major plot hole for me, for example, is that he remembers that he did a lot of bad things. He remembers that he's Sauron, and then all of a sudden he's not Sauron. That doesn't make any sense. So I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say that made sense, but no, it didn't make any sense, because he remembered everything, and he remembered having done bad things. He remembered being Sauron and accepted that, and then into his mind the idea that Nori said to him, "But you're good." That part doesn't make any sense. The stranger is in Istari, and he couldn't save Sadok. Why couldn't he save Sadok? He just took the life of 3 people, and he couldn't heal Sadok? I don't know. So you're here to help is exactly what Nori says. So in the period of time in which Sauron is jumping in and out of Galadriel's head, there's an exchange where she's, of course, essentially to a certain extent talking to herself, or talking to Sauron in her head, and he's screaming at her that, what will they do when they know that Sauron lives because of you? I have to correct them on that. Sauron was originally what would be a Maiar, and originally an Ainur. So he's not alive because of her. It's not, she didn't keep him alive. So Sauron is not a normal man. So was Sauron going to drown on a raft? Not really. That's no way. No. So a special shout out to Nomad with No Land. So thanks so much for watching. Give me a like, subscribe. Later.